Welcome back to episode number 37. 37 of Raise the Banner podcast. One of your two co-hosts tonight, McAtoy here with Benny Ballgame Dearth. JR is a little bit unavailable this week. Hopefully he'll be back next week. But Benny, how you doing?
Good. Uh, can't complain. Uh, busy season at work, but is what it is. But good. Uh, yeah, ready to go.
All right, yeah, sounds good. Obviously, Sunday night, so it was about 4 days ago. We saw Netflix premiere or show, I don't know, Netflix sponsored, the greatest roast of all time. Tom Brady was the main subject. Obviously, for everyone who watched, he was not the only topic of jokes, to
No,
say the least.
he was not.
I know you haven't completely finished it. I know you just said you had a little bit left to go and watching it. But what were your overall thoughts on what you've seen so far?
So it's funny. Obviously, it's a roast. That's what it's meant to be. It's nice to see that, especially in today's day and age of everything needing to be like PC and you can't offend anybody or rub somebody the wrong way. That you can drop some of the crude, racy, like over the top stuff still, and not be canceled. Because I've got probably 45, 50 minutes left. I'm just inside of an hour left. Um, it's I paused it at the start of when Andrew Schultz takes the mic. Um, so unpopular opinion, general statement, not trying to get us canceled. I personally do not find female comedians overly funny. So I actually not struggled. I just was underwhelmed with Nikki Glazer's performance. I thought it was good, but I didn't find myself like busting a gut laughing like I did with some of the other stuff. I have a soft spot for the character of Ron Burgundy, so like that was funny to me because the character in and of itself is funny to me. So it's like who he is, not necessarily all the jokes he told. I thought Randy Moss was absolutely horrendous. It seemed like he was
So
just up there
bad.
to. I thought he like it almost felt like he didn't really know like the concept of a roast, right? It was just he told some stories and he was kind of like, why did I get screwed over? Why did you not cheat when I was there? I don't have a ring. Gronk wasn't very good either. Too much of the stuff was kind of like off the cuff, and he was like, "Oh, everyone thinks I'm a huge dumbass, but here I am up there telling jokes on the spot." But I didn't think some of them were particularly great. Uh, Bill surprised me. I know it's a roast and I get it, but just given what we got from him for the better part of 25 years, to see him say the things that he said, I mean, and to be there in general, right? Because there's all this behind the scenes animosity between him, Brady, and Kraft. Not necessarily individually, but the three of them are kind of weird. Like the group is kind of like the chemistry is weird, more so between him and Kraft than him and Brady. I think him and Brady understand each other. It was a mutual separation. They still love and respect each other, even if they're not like super buddy buddy, maybe like they used to be. I saw a clip of it on social media. I haven't gotten to the awkward like Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, like cheersing a shot of whatever. I'm
Yeah.
guessing it's either vodka or tequila. Haven't gotten there yet. That's will certainly be interesting. But Bill surprised me. I certainly appreciated him being there. It kind of felt like, well, people had kind of expected him to show up. Nobody really knew that he was going to be there, or weren't sure if he was going to show up. Obviously, he wasn't part of the main stage. It was kind of like he'll come out from backstage, take a seat in the front type of deal. Some of his stuff was pretty good, but good overall. I mean, obviously, we haven't had a roast in a long time, so funny. Definitely don't watch it with your kids. For anybody listening in that hasn't seen it yet, do not watch it in front of children. I would highly, probably even at anybody under the age of 16, really. But yeah, I would recommend checking it out if you haven't already. It's certainly funny, and I look forward to finishing it. Not tonight, because we got this. I think the Celtics are on at 7. So not tonight, but I look forward to finishing up in the next couple of days. what what who would you say was? I mean, whether it was your favorite or somebody you thought didn't do super great. I know we kind of mutually agree that Randy wasn't super great, but what were your takeaways?
Um, I mean, overall, you didn't like Nikki Glazer. I thought that she was pretty hilarious. While female comics, I get what you're saying, they have an easier avenue, or at least in that scenario, had an easier avenue to make jokes. Obviously, like, they made the jokes of like Edelman being Brady's butt buddy and riding Edelman, but in a general
Yeah.
sense, they're not males aren't gonna like make self gay jokes towards Brady type of
Right.
thing. And so, like, Nikki Glazer had an easier avenue to kind of talk about like how she thinks he's hot and would cheat on her girl her excuse me her boyfriend for him and all that type of stuff.
She did
I
say
thought,
she would shoot him for an opportunity at a lottery ticket to fillet Tom Brady, I
yeah,
believe was the quote.
yeah. She was good. Gronk, I agree with you. I think a lot of people felt like he was very good. I think he was fine, but like what kind of made people like it is more just his personality and gimmick more than
Yeah.
like the jokes itself, which
Yeah.
is fine. Like that's Rob Gronkowski.
Yes.
Belichick was pretty good. He came out. He had a few good jokes. We're obviously seeing a different side of Belichick, and I think it's by design. I think he's trying to make himself seem more relatable.
Yeah.
For
He came out and he made the reference to um it was like the roast of Tom Brady, not to be confused with the 10-part miniseries roast about me on Apple TV.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean,
trying to
between
make
that, like the Gronk joke, he made a few Brady jokes and stuff like that. Like he even made an Amendola joke, who I don't think Amendola really loved it very much, but
he
you know,
didn't seem. Obviously, still have some time left, but he didn't seem he being Amendola didn't seem like he was interested in being there.
yeah, I don't know what like that whole back row was kind of odd being there.
Well,
Like,
McGinnis and Brady have been semi close.
no, I
Uh,
know, but like none of them like participated.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
all just were there as like audience, like Dan Copen. Like, like why is Dan Copen there?
He snapped the ball back to Ken Walter when they won the first Super Bowl. Obviously, that means
Yeah.
you get the second row seat on the rows to Tom Brady.
Uh, yeah. So I mean, Belichick was good. Edelman, have you seen Edelman? Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
he was okay.
Yeah, I mean, he was solid. Um, Andrew Schultz was solid. What's his name? Like Rinchclaff
I can't
or
think of his
something.
first name. Hincliffe is his first name.
Hank,
Is it
I forget what
Tom
his name is, but he
or
didn't make a
Timmy?
ton of Brady jokes, but the jokes that he made were very funny.
Yeah, what I liked about him is that
Um,
like nobody on stage was well, I should say it like this. Everybody on stage was fair game with him. He just went down the line. He picked on Bledsoe, he picked on Jeff Ross, he picked on Kreischer and Segura. I'm a big Tom Segura fan, so he was pretty good. Um,
oh, I
Kreischer's
thought they
not
sucked.
Well, so the thing about Kreischer's
Both
not
of them
real.
sucked.
So Kreischer to me is his style of comedy is not to say that he's not funny, but his style of comedy is not mine. Um,
He's more the gimmick. He reminds me a little bit of Gronk in
yeah,
the sense like it's this personality that
yeah, like
that makes things a little
yeah,
funnier.
he's the guy that gets hammered and takes his shirt off during comedy skits. Um, whereas I think not that Burt Kreischer's not, but where I think that Tom Segura is more authentically funny. The two of them together, in a in an organic way, really play off each other really well. They have a pretty good podcast called Two Bears One Cave, which is pretty funny. It's just random stories and them drinking on a podcast. Um, so like organically they're pretty funny. I felt like it was scripted, right? So it's tricky. Seemed kind of, I don't want to say again like that's not organic. But like they were okay. But I love how like Hincliffe kind of went down the line and like Kevin Hart. It felt like the roast of Tom Brady and also Kevin Hart. Like Kevin, and I don't know if that's normal. It's been a long time since I've seen a roast.
It's
So like,
it, it was more just because he was the announcer, so he was like
yeah,
the
is that
number
normal?
two target.
Everyone picks on the host. Is that a standard thing for a roast or no?
I don't know if it's standard, but like Kevin's also a comedian, and there's so many like layup jokes you can make about him.
Yeah, um,
Primarily him being short, but
yeah,
like
that was everyone picked on his height. Um,
the Nikki Glazer comment was like Kevin's 5'2", 150 pounds, 155 after The Rock finishes. Like
yeah,
that,
like
that
yeah, that was pretty good. And then there was the other one where she was like, I know it's almost almost my time's almost up, so I'll keep this Kevin Hart.
yeah.
I thought that was pretty good. And then who was it that said, um, Tom Brady's afraid of giants, so that's why Kevin Hart is hosting. I forget
I
who said
forget.
that.
I know.
That was the
Yeah.
opening. That was the opening line. I mean, but good on Tom. I mean, Tom's also. There were a couple awkward moments, but I thought he was kind of a good sport about the whole thing. Obviously I think he's trying to move on and break himself away from his NFL career. Obviously, he's going into broadcasting, which don't really know how that's going to go. I mean, he inked a pretty lucrative contract with Fox, correct? I think he's replacing Greg Olson.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but the other part of it is that Tom's been going to like broadcasting classes because apparently they did like a dry run just to see what it was going to be like. And I guess Fox thought he was absolutely horrendous. And they were like, you need to go to classes and figure out how to get this done in order to.
I didn't hear that he was like. I heard that he has been practicing with. Um, I forget the guy's name that he's going to be teamed up with, but that he's been like just.
Is it, oh my God, is it Kevin Burkhardt?
Yeah, I think it's him. I heard he's been like at their studio with Burkhardt during his downtime and just like literally just like running through games and practicing.
Yeah, and so I
And
think
the
it's just some people it just doesn't come natural too, whereas I kind of maybe Brady's in that position. Um, but yeah, I mean, good on him. I mean, obviously it's you have to be pretty vulnerable if you're going to be like, yeah, like go ahead and roast me in front of millions of people on live TV when it's essentially no holds barred. I mean, there's obviously some pretty crude racy stuff in there. Um, but the one awkward thing I would say about Tom was when Jeff Ross made the joke about Tom Brady offering Robert Kraft a massage. And then he walked up and you could hear like the mic picked up what he said and he was basically like, don't say that shit again. Basically being
yeah,
like,
that I mean that seems to be like obviously an interesting topic. Ross said he wasn't really serious. Bledsoe said it wasn't scripted, and then Andrew Scholes today or something like that said that they were told prior to keep away from Kraft's massage jokes.
okay.
Um,
So, but kind of an odd, but like awkward, right? Because it's live and the mic picked him up. It wasn't like he was over there being
yeah, well,
like, no, no, no.
Scholes says it was like he was like we were told that because Scholes made a joke about like
You talking about
massages on a
you,
Sunday.
you're talking about Andrew Schultz?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
he makes a joke, and I know you just said you're about to start. He makes a joke, something about like massaging Jesus or something, and he said like the joke originally said like oh, and also Robert Kraft, but he took it out
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because they were told not to do that, and so you know I think obviously that at this point where we know more based off Shell's comment that they had Kraft a little bit off limits, probably by Brady's request. Uh,
Yeah, I would say
and
so.
and say, and Charles was like, you know what, like it's fine. Like it wasn't even. It's not like he was like saying, hey, don't talk about, um, Giselle or my marriage or something like that.
Right.
Um, and then the only other Nikki Glazer came out and said that she and I think everybody kind of I don't know if this was like it wasn't like a mandate from Brady, but like she and a lot of the other roasters basically decided that they're not going to really include much about Brady's kids. Any specific thing. So Nikki was like, "Oh, I had a joke basically about like, hey, let's like make out after the after party. I can pretend I'm your son." and and so like yeah, I mean that would have been funny, but they would have been like, you know what I mean? So she's like, I decided to keep that out. Granted, it's funny that like they're all saying these jokes and all this stuff after where like it's becoming news. So like, what's the fucking point of the conversation if you're just going to like not doing it if you're just going to talk about it after?
Yeah, I mean, there's truth to that. The thing that what's interesting too is that, and I mean, probably not surprising given the current state of things, is the little bit of backlash. I guess like Giselle wasn't super thrilled about some of the jokes made about the divorce and things that happened. And then you have I can't think of her name. Aaron Hernandez's ex fiance, basically saying that it was in poor taste to make jokes about him. Um, which to a degree I get, but the nature of what a roast is, like those things fall within the purview of what a roast is about, right? That the person being roasted gives parameters that people can operate in and out of, um, and then beyond that, like everything's fair game, right? So just interesting with the backlash. I know that there was obviously some issues between Brady and Giselle at the end, on both sides, obviously. So interesting to see that there was that she made a public statement. I don't know if it means that there was any promise or statement from Brady to her indicating like, hey, like I'm doing this thing. Let's
Hey, can you can hear me, right?
nope. You're frozen on my end. I just
I know, but
assumed
you can hear me, right?
yes, I can hear you.
I'm gonna leave the studio and come back. Hold on.
Okay. So as I was saying, we had the backlash from Giselle. So interesting, interesting there. Again, not a great ending between the two of them. And then you had the Aaron Hernandez stuff, which I can see both sides. It's pretty sensitive to the Hernandez family, and anybody that was closely connected to him. Obviously with past indiscretions and what happened to him, during and after the trial. I mean, obviously that's you know pretty gut wrenching stuff, and can't really imagine what they're going through. But in today's day and age, I mean, that's what happens in a roast. So again, I kind of see both sides, but understandably so. Can see why somebody would be a little upset by what had happened. So look forward to finishing that up, and I guess we can circle back and see what the rest of the show has in store. Guess I'll wait for Matt a little bit here. Oh, there he is.
A little bit of connection issues, but
All all right. And so I was just saying, with the backlash, I can kind of see both sides. Like Giselle, not so much. Um, I mean, especially, I know things didn't end well, and obviously it takes two to tango. So I understand, it's not just him, it's not just her, it's both of them. But the Aaron Hernandez stuff is pretty tricky. Like I understand, obviously his family went through a lot. Obviously what he did aside, his family still had to endure the fact that he was due to spend the rest of his life in prison until he took his own life, and that's a sensitive thing to talk about. So I see both sides of it, but at the same time, it's roasts are supposed to be we're going to make jokes. Kevin Hart said it several times. It's like getting people to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's what a roast is all about. So like I get it, it's a sensitive topic, but at the same time, like I don't think anybody really means that in a sense of anything other than it's a roast, and we're going to pick on some people, and that's it. It's not meant in poor taste, at least we hope not. But
yeah, I mean, roasts are. I was thinking about this today. Actually, I was like, the roast is kind of a funny concept because like it's an opportunity to say things that in any other situation people would get actually angry about someone saying those things. So it's like this wide open platform. In terms of the Hernandez stuff, like that's his fiance and making the comments about like her kid not like being able to see that type of stuff. Like, do we really think that his kid isn't gonna learn everything? There's an entire documentary about him, and we're worried about like a few jokes at a roast. Like that stuff that just doesn't really make any sense to me. Giselle side of things, look, like I don't know. We don't know for certain if the speculation is true that she like did cheat with a jujitsu instructor and all that. So like maybe if it's not true, I could understand on her part, like maybe getting a little bit upset about it. But I mean, if it is true, like don't cheat and you won't get the comments made.
Yeah. And
Like
so, I mean,
you cheat on Tom of all people, you cheat on Tom Brady, the people that like, half of this, especially in New England, but half of this world freaking loves that dude.
yeah,
And you're the ex-wife that now cheated on him. Like, of course, like, there's going to be jokes, and of course, you're going to get backlash on it. So, like, again, if it didn't happen, that's one thing. But, like, I mean, if it did, what is she getting angry about? She did it to herself.
right. Um, so yeah, I mean, we'll obviously I'll have to wait and see what the remainder of the roast has in store, but I mean, yeah, I mean that's kind of the nature of really what this is about. You know, I, I'd like to think that, I mean, especially given who those people are, that you're either a pro athlete who's really close to Tom, or you're a comedian who has some relationship with Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady has to have, like, he's got a relationship with I know he's got a relationship with Segura. I don't know about his relationship with Bert. He may have just talked to Segura, and Segura's like, oh, because Bert and Tom are best friends. Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer, not Brady.
Yeah.
Um, Kreischer and Segura are best friends. So I could assume that if Brady went to Segura and was like, "Hey, like I want you to be part of this," and he's like, "Yeah, like can I bring Bird in? We'll do a thing together." But like nobody's up on stage if they have zero relationship to Tom Brady.
Oh,
So,
I don't know about that.
but like who? So well,
Nikki Glazer basically came out and said like she really didn't know anything about, like, obviously she knew who Tom Brady was in like the basics. Like she didn't really know Tom Brady personally. I don't think like Andrew Schulz did. I don't know if like Sam J did, stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah. I mean maybe, but the people who are non comedians,
Yeah,
right?
they are. Yeah,
No,
they have to
like
bring in people that know him. You can't.
yeah, like nobody who was a non-comedian, right? Like everybody on, like, to Tom's right, like stage left, like viewers left, was a either a super close personal friend, or obviously Bill was up there. I don't know if I know Kraft was in the audience. I don't know if he went up on stage, but like those are all ex teammates and close personal friends, and then he had like other friends on the other side. I mean, I don't know if he has a relationship with Jeff Ross. I mean, Jeff Ross is going to be there no matter what. Um, so I mean, you figure for the most part, like the friends of Tom Brady are not going to be cracking jokes to take like, I mean, you assume, right? They're not taking like personal hard digs on certain situations, but who really knows?
Yeah, and to finish this up, I guess, but you know, Brady signed up for this. Like he knew what he was getting into. And so like I saw someone today basically was like, "Oh, he like put Robert Kraft off limits but not his own marriage and like ex-wife." And I'm like, "But Kraft has nothing to really do with him." Like that joke. Like the massage joke has nothing to do with Brady really. It's
Right.
like, and so like for Brady to say, "Okay, like just don't attack him on that." Like that's like much more reasonable to say, "Hey, don't make jokes about one of the lowest hanging fruit of a joke that you can make about me." Like everybody made a fucking divorce joke and a jujitsu instructor joke or a ring joke that Giselle gave it back and all that. Like every single person did. Um, and so it's like let me rephrase, every person who didn't know Brady personally, I think did. All the actors and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean it was a good roast. I'm happy he did it. It kind of made him a little bit more personable. Uh and it was just kind of, yeah, it was a good time. I mean, I liked it a lot. Um but yeah, let's transition. Let's do all three Boston sports, this well, other Boston sports. And maybe we'll get back into Patriots minicamp. But what are your quick thoughts on the Bruins? We're now tied 1-1 against the Florida Panthers. They they won game one, I think it was 5-1, and lost game two 6-1. So two completely flipped games. What are your overall thoughts on how things have played out so far?
Um, I mean, obviously you have kind of two extremes, but you had I think game one felt like a product of the fact that the Bruins had just come off of a 7-game series that didn't need to be a 7-game series, but probably like big picture may have helped them because Florida beat Tampa in 5, I believe. So they were off for a handful of days, 4 or 5 days, whatever it was. Um, so I think that certainly helped the Bruins. Florida probably played with a little bit of rust, because they hadn't played in 4 or 5 days, whereas the Bruins had played 2 nights ago, and it was a pretty emotional overtime game. Swayman obviously maintained his dominance. I think I didn't expect 6-1, but I kind of figured in game two Florida was going to get back on track and get focused and take care of business so that they didn't come back to Boston down 2-0, because I think that would be a bad spot for them. The nice thing, though, is that all the Bruins have to do is win their home games the rest of the way, and that's it. So it would be nice if they can, hold serve. They haven't been great on home ice since Game 7 of the 2019 Stanley Cup Finals. I think they're right around 500. I think going into it was midway through the Toronto series. I think it was after they lost Game 5 at home. Um, they were 7-6, 8-7 in home playoff games since losing Game 7 to St. Louis in 2019. I really think they have to, they gotta take care of business at home. So hopefully they can take care of that. Obviously if Florida takes one of these games here in Boston, then it's all square again, right? And then it just becomes essentially a best of three, if they take at least one of these games from the bees. So I mean, last night's game was nuts. It was 148 combined penalty minutes. Pat Maroon got ejected. But I would say the nice thing about what took place last night was, even though they were down, I think it was 4-1 when a lot of the bubbling over and the physical contact really ramped up when they were down 4-1. The nice thing is that it seemed that they didn't just kind of roll over and accept their fate and just like tail tuck between their legs, just take the loss and fly home. That they were saying, hey, like, yeah, like you're kicking our butts right now on the scoreboard, but you're not going to intimidate us. We're still going to stand tall and have some pride and play hard from start to finish. I think, no moral victories, right? But I think it would be a bad look if they lose 6-1 and they were getting embarrassed, like from a discipline attitude standpoint as well. But they didn't they stood up and they took the punches on the chin and said, yeah, like you whooped us tonight, but like we're not going to scale back the physicality. We're not just going to pack it in and end this game as quick as possible so that we can charter a flight back home and get ready for you guys in 2 days or 3 days, whatever it is. I forget if there's an extra day built in between games 2 and 3. So that was nice to see. I've gone back and forth goalie wise. What do you do? So I'll kind of say my little piece, and I'll ask you the question of who do you start in game 3. I've gone back and forth. I think if your conversations with Swayman point you into him saying like, I've been playing every day, I'm feeling a little burnt out, well then you have to go with Allmark. I get that, you stay with the hot goalie, but Swayman gave up, what was it, he gave up 3 or 4 of the 6 goals before Allmark came in. So I think, as long as he says he's good to go, I think maybe you still stick with him. But if he's indicating that he's like, I kind of need a night, I'm pretty burnt out. Allmark had really good success against the Panthers in the regular season. I was talking to a buddy of mine. I think, if my math is correct, I think I had him at 85 saves on 88 shots over the 3 games that he played against Florida in the regular season. And I think it was in 2 games, they were 3-2 overtime wins, and 1 game was, I think it was a 2-1 or a 3-1 regulation win. So he really held his own against Florida in the regular season. So, if Swayman is really feeling like he's kind of getting burnt out, or you kind of want to give him a break just to clear his head and get back on track, starting Allmark in Game 3 is not a bad idea. But I mean, do you have any thoughts? I mean, are you going Allmark no matter what? Like, are you like, what
I
do you
mean, I
think?
think I would kind of be in a similar boat to you. I mean, the good news is like it's not like Allmark's like a typical backup. He's also a very good goalie. So I think I would sit down with Swayman and just kind of be like, "Where are you at?" Uh, and he needs to be honest. I would personally say option one is to stick with Swayman. But like you said, if he's honest and he says, I'm a little bit burnt out, or I'm a little bit tired, I have no problem going with Hallmark. But I mean, like I said, my preference is to stick with Swayman. In terms of the first 2 games, what it was interesting to see last night, that the whole Pasternak and what's his fucking name, uh, Tovich or whatever. Oh yeah, I'm having a
Oh,
mind blank.
Kachuk.
Kachuk. I don't know. Yeah, I was having a mind blank what his name was. That was pretty interesting to see. Pasta's usually not like that. So it was really, I like to see that as someone in his scenario where he's like really showing the emotion that he typically doesn't. It'll be a little bit more interesting to see if someone like Pat Maroon or anyone else in the Bruins kind of steps up and challenges Kachuk again, next game in Game 3. But like you said, they're tied 1-1. Game 2 was not very pretty. But big picture, you took one in Florida. Now you technically have the home ice advantage. You game this Game 3. I would probably say I think this Game 3, whoever wins Game 3 will win the series. Um, that's
Yeah,
just my gut. I think if the Bruins can come in and win Game 3, they put a ton of pressure, obviously, on Florida. Um, I mean, we've obviously seen crazier things. The Bruins were just up 3-1, and then it took the Game 7. Um,
and they were up
and
3-1 on Florida last year and lost 3 in a row.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, hockey's as crazy as any sport with that type of stuff. So it's obviously very unpredictable. But my gut tells me whoever wins Game 3, I think, will end up going on to win the series. I just kind of like going up 2-1, and especially if it's Boston, they could go up 2-1 with another game at home. Like that's an immense amount of pressure, and then vice versa. Versus for Florida is if they take Game 3. I could see them coming out Game 4 in the Bruins, not so much folding, but uh, getting their ass kicked in Game 4. Yeah, so I mean that's it's just interesting to see. I would start Swayman. I think
Okay.
he's just been, the best, goalie really in all of the entire playoffs. And outside of one bad game, which really the team as a whole didn't play very well, Charlie McAvoy has been a little bit lost this series. I don't Really love what I've seen from him. Um, he needs to certainly be better. The offensive scoring, it was good in game one to see a lot of the third and fourth line guys kind of playing their role and scoring some big goals. But really, like, I need to see more from McAvoy. I need to see more from Marchand. I think they're the Bruins' second and third best players behind Pasternak,
Yeah.
and they need to kind of step up and play a little bit better. So we'll see how things play out. But I mean they're in a decent spot. You took one from Florida, so like that's what you
Yeah.
realistic goal was. Like
Yeah.
that's what the dream was. Not the dream, obviously you take two, but that was the goal going into game one and two was to take at least one of them.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll just kind of go back to what I had brought up is how they didn't really back down from the physicality. They were still willing to mix it up in game two. Hopefully that they can keep their spirits high, and still keep that edge a little bit going into game three, where Florida, if they rolled over in game two, like Florida's got a mental edge over them because they know, like, hey, if we get the Bruins down, then they're just gonna they'll just fold, and then
Yeah,
it's
give them a couple punches and they'll
it,
fall. You know what I mean?
yeah, but given what they did in game two, I don't think that. I mean, Florida can't really expect that. Maybe they still try to push the envelope and try to get the bees backed into a corner a little bit. But after what happened in game two, I don't think they can think that they can just kind of push them around. And they know that if they get them down, 1-0, 2-0, or 2-1, something like that, that the bees are going to tighten up and fold. I just don't think they can expect that. Which, um, I think I know that in the first two games, the scores were not competitive at all. But I think the scores are not necessarily super indicative of how I would expect the rest of the series to go. Um,
No, no.
you know,
I mean, it was just kind of odd that I mean, especially with it was flipped, where each game
yeah,
was a blowout and the other way.
yeah,
I would expect a hard fought game. I could see this going seven, like most certainly. I almost expect it to go at least six,
yeah. And this is
either
a
way.
and the Bruins, to a degree, I think, are playing with a little bit of house money. They certainly had, and we've touched on it before. They've certainly had some peaks and valleys this year. They came out on fire. 2/3 of the way through the season, they kind of stumbled a little bit, picked it up a little bit towards the end. I know they kind of mailed it in towards the end. All they had to do was win one of their last two games, and they would have had the number one seed in the East. Um, which I don't think it really mattered to them. And obviously it ended up going seven, but I think they got the match that they wanted because they matched up better against Toronto than they did against Tampa. Um, I think that they kind of knew, and they kind of built the team a little bit for Florida, knew that probably expected they were going to get them in the second round. But I think that to a degree, I think they overachieved a little bit, which brings me to my point of I think they're playing with a little bit of house money. I think, they stole one on the road. They're coming home. Hard to feel good about much of anything after a 6-1 loss. But, I think that, they come back to Boston being like, hey, like, we took it to them in game one. We didn't back down in game two despite the scoreboard. And, they should be able to skate with some confidence in game three. And, I think, best case scenario, if they're going back to Florida up 3-1, great. But, I think that realistically, I would kind of expect them to split here in Boston as well. It would be nice to go back to Florida up 3-2 because then you can kind of
3-1.
play you 3-1. I'm sorry, because you can still play your game in game five, knowing that you've got game six back on home ice. With the Garden crowd behind you, with a chance to clinch a spot in the East Final. But obviously they just got to do as cliche as it is, one game at a time. But it'd be nice if they could take these two games here in Boston, and then obviously all the pressure's on Florida for game five because they have to win. But it'd be nice, but I kind of expect them to go back to Florida 2-2.
Yeah, that's kind of basically where I'm at. But let's transition to Boston Celtics. They start up game two is in less than an hour here. Uh, they and we talked about it a little bit because of the whole Maz's comments the other yesterday on 98.5. But they're going into this series as overwhelming favorites. I think they were 12.5 point favorites, and like minus 800 or something like that to win the series before game one. Now it's probably higher, probably minus 1100, 1200, something like that. But what were your thoughts, I guess, on game one and And really, what do you see the rest of this series playing out to be?
I mean, game one, kind of went how I thought. Like big picture, like on a micro level, not so much. They felt um almost kind of the opposite of the Bruins and the Panthers. Like the Celtics kind of came out and looked like a team that hadn't played in a few days, whereas the Cavs had just come off a 7-game series with Orlando. So it was competitive early, but then the Seas just took it to them in the second half. It was a semi-competitive game in the first half, and then the Seas kind of ran away with it a little bit in the second half. I think that you expect Donovan Mitchell to get his. He's pretty inconsistent, but he's played the Bruins pretty tough. So
Celtics.
Celtics. Sorry, too many Boston sports on the mind this week with the Bees and the Celtics in the playoffs. So I thought I thought the Seas played well. Derek White continues to prove that he's as valuable a bench player as you can find in this league. I look back and think that we probably fleeced San Antonio in that deal. I think we gave a first round pick, one first round pick for him.
Him and
Um,
Josh Richardson. Yeah,
which
it was
is
a steal.
I mean, big picture, right? Like, and I know that there's not apples to apples, but you go back a couple of years and you look at a guy like Matthew Dellavedova getting a $20 million a year contract, and any NBA player worth talent goes for multiple draft picks, protected first rounders, stuff like that. And for us to just get Derek White straight up for a first round pick has really worked out for us. I think is it David Shine? Is he the ESPN NBA guy? Put out an article prior to the second round series, basically saying strengths and weaknesses of the 8 remaining teams, and cited that specifically for Boston, the depth behind Tatum and Brown is their strength, and called Derek White out specifically, saying that specifically Derek White, because he's been absolutely nails his entire postseason. I know it's been 6 games for the Celtics, but he's really stepped up a lot, and it's nice to know that it's really not just Tatum and Brown and Porzingis. I think he's due back. We were talking about this the other day. He's due back within the next, call it 8 to 10 days or so. But I think if they can, especially if they put the series away early and show that they don't need him, I would say like don't even bother rushing him back. Bring him in if you need him. Hopefully they can take care of the Cavs. Given their talent, I kind of expected it to go 6 games. That might change after tonight. Depends on how the game goes. But the first game kind of went how I thought it would. And so, I would expect, a little bit more of the same. I'm just going to look up the info on tonight's game since how you brought it up. So they are 13-point favorites tonight. So more of a favorite than they were going into game one. But the thing with the Celtics too is they haven't really proven that home court helps them out at all. I forget what the time frame is, but they're like over roughly the same time frame, last 4 or 5 years. They're basically 500 at home.
In
I
the
think they're
playoff.
in the playoffs. Yes, I think they're better in road playoff games. I think they're better than they are at home, which is interesting. But I think I hesitate to say this, but like I'd like to see Cleveland push them a little bit. You know, only because you probably figured the Knicks are going to come out of that series with Indiana. They had a good comeback win last night, and I think that especially if you don't have Porzingis, which he probably should be back for the Eastern Conference Final, I'd like the Celtics to. I don't want to say struggle. It's a terrible way of putting it, but like get challenged a little bit. I'd like Cleveland to kind of push them a little bit and see them kind of rise above and not just sleepwalk through a series like they did with the Heat. It took the Heat basically not missing for an entire game to win a game, and it wasn't. It was like 10 point 10-point win. Otherwise, the Celtics kind of sleptwalk through that series. They're just so much better than most any other team. So I'd like to get challenged a little bit. Have some competitive games so that they know what it's like to feel a little bit of the pressure in playoffs this year. I think there's some value in that, but I'd like to think that they can take care of business tonight, and go into Cleveland up 2-0.
Yeah, you know, I think basically the big picture thing is they're just significantly more talented than Cleveland.
Yes.
And so, as much as like maybe they could get a little fight against them and see how they react and all that type of stuff, I just don't see it. I really don't. Maybe if Jared Allen, yeah, comes back for Cleveland and Porzingis isn't back, then maybe, but like I really wouldn't be shocked if this is over in 4, if not max 5.
You're talking Celtics Cavs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe Cleveland can take a game in Cleveland in game 3 or 4, but I don't expect this to go more than 5, and if it does only go 4 or 5, depending on obviously how fast the Eastern Conference Finals starts up, but I would basically play it game by game with Porzingis and say like, if they feel like he could maybe come back for game 1, I would say, like, unless you're very confident in it, I would um I would sit him. I would sit him in game 1, and if they win game 1, I would probably sit him game 2. If you lose game 1, maybe there's a little bit more urgency to start him, get him back for game 2. But like I would basically take it game by game going into the Eastern Conference Finals and say if you win game 1, sit him again. If you win game 2, sit him again. And if you win, I say if you win game 3 and you feel he's 100%, bring him back, I guess, for game 4 in the hopes of you could finish it out and get him some work in before the finals. But unless they feel like they desperately need him, don't rush him back. Meaning, if they're kind of cape walking through Cleveland, why, if you're up 3-0 versus Cleveland and you feel like he can come back, why? You know, don't bring him
Right.
back for don't force him back for game 4. Let him take another 2 or 3 days off. And then maybe same thing for the Eastern Conference Finals. But in terms, yeah, I mean, they're significantly more talented than the Cavaliers. I think they're really going to be a lot more talented than the New York Knicks. Jalen Brunson's obviously very good. I think he's going to be tough to stop, but I also think the Celtics have the best defensive backcourt in basketball. And I think that they're just going to overwhelm, Brunson and the Knicks to the point where I really don't like the next 2 series shouldn't take more than 10 games in total. I really don't. I really think that it shouldn't. Could it? Obviously. I mean, I think New York could go to 6 games or something like that. But it shouldn't, in my opinion. I just think they're tremendously more talented than both of those teams. So
Yeah.
we'll see how things goes. And kind of to the topic I brought up earlier was Maz was basically making a comment like a championship would be less gratifying if they cakewalk through. And it really just like it just annoyed the shit out of me when I heard it and I understand what he's saying, but first of all, there isn't a single fan that's going to be like, "Oh, I don't feel as satisfied that we won a championship because we were just so much better than everybody else." Like it's not like, I know Butler was hurt last series, but like it's not like we're facing like these teams that are handicapped where like Cleveland's without like Donovan Mitchell and we're just like getting these cakewalk series. It's the fact that the Celtics are just significantly better than these teams. So like I just didn't get what Maz was trying to push. So like don't tell me it's like it's gonna be less that sorry that they're too good. Like that's what I
Well,
just
I mean, not to like defend it, but just to play devil's advocate. His argument was more so from if they don't play any good teams along the way. Not that, because obviously if they
but
beat
what
Cleveland,
defines a good team?
like say the Knicks lose to the Pacers, and the Celtics run to the finals is Miami with no Butler, a vastly inferior Cleveland Cavaliers team and an even more inferior Pacers team. And then let's just say by luck of the draw that the T Wolves or Nuggets lose to Dallas. I think that was his point. That
I
if
like
the Celtics don't play if they go through New York, like even if they beat New York in 5 or 6 games and it's not close, they still went through the 4 and the 2, which is the hardest seed wise. That's the hardest you can do to get to a championship. And then if they beat, because I'm gonna guess that obviously pre-playoffs, Denver was probably the favorite to win the West, even though they weren't the 1 seed. I know Oklahoma City is really good, but Minnesota's been playing out of their minds. They're up 2-0, and they're now the betting favorite to win the West. So if they were to go through like a legitimate path, right? Like they beat the Knicks, yeah, they're far superior to the Knicks. The Knicks are still the 2 seed in the East, right? It's not like I think that his point was more so like, you know, are you going through the worst team in the East without their best player, an overrated Cavs team, a you know a probably a poor Pacers team. I think that was what his point was. Like if you go through all these quote unquote tomato can teams and you're not playing the Knicks and then either like the Wolves, the Nuggets, or the Thunder, that it's like, you know, the bar talk will be, you know,
like here's
do,
my
do
thing. Here's my
like
thing.
like a championship is still a championship, right? Like we talked about this too, like just to go the other way. Like how many times did we talk about, you know, can Tom Brady win a Super Bowl? Can the Pats win a Super Bowl without having to go through these gauntlets where we have to sweat it out every time? But then like after the fact, it's like, yeah, like they when the Seahawks Super Bowl, they beat the Baltimore Ravens in the second round, who were as good of a 6 seed as you'll ever find in a playoffs. They beat I mean, granted, like the Colts were vastly overrated that year, but then Tom Brady has arguably one of his best performances against arguably at that time the best defense in the NFL for a period of 3 to 4 years. Like that was like you look back at that and you go like, wow, like they legitimately, not that winning a title doesn't mean you earn it, but they really earned a title having to go through Baltimore, Indy again. Like that was a like whatever, and then you beat the Legion of Boom. Whereas if you look back and like I wonder if you look back and go, oh yeah, like yeah, we won, but like it was kind of boring because they just blew everybody away. And maybe boring's a better word for it. Like I would much rather have them play exciting competitive basketball games on their way to a title than just sweep their way through and I'd be like, yeah, like we won a title, but like it was kind of boring to
I
watch. Like that's where more like I would go with it is I want it to be like I love the edge of your seat. Like, are they gonna pull this out? And then at the end, you're like, wow, like they really rose up and overcame like the best of the league through with them and they still won it. I just like that adds to more like the excitement aspect of it. So I don't think it's a gratification. I think it's like edge of your seat, excitement, suspense, more so than like because I remember at the end, like not again, like not to harp on the whole Pats thing from 7 years ago, 10 years ago at this point. Um, but like when we beat the Colts in that AFC title game, was it 45-7? I was like, it didn't feel like a playoff. It didn't feel like a real. It didn't feel real because I was like, we just blew the doors off this team. Like this didn't really feel like.
I get what you're saying. My thing with all this is two things. First, football's just different because it's just like so much more of a like talent level in the NFL matters less than the NBA. Like you can just be much more talented than other teams in the NBA. And so like part of the issue right now with the Celtics is they're just significantly more talented than other teams. And that's like it's so much more glaring in the NBA to see those type of things. And so when I see like all right, like in the hypothetical that they went through the Pacers next and then Dallas, like I get it, but like if the Pacers came back from down 2-0 to the Knicks, they deserve to be there. They
Yeah,
just
yeah,
beat
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if Dallas goes through OKC in let's say Minnesota, like
Or
they
or
deserve
or Denver.
like they fully deserve if like so like
Yeah,
I get the concept, but like if we face Dallas in the finals and we kick their ass after they just went through OKC in Minnesota or Denver, like if they could go through those two teams, they could easily beat the Celtics.
Yeah,
I think Denver and Minnesota in OKC are arguably, I would probably say, the second, third, and fourth best team in the NBA.
I would agree with that.
I would probably put the Knicks. I don't even know if I would put the Knicks. I wouldn't put the Knicks as the fourth best team. Um,
Well, they'd have to be fifth.
yeah, excuse me, fifth. I wouldn't put them as probably the fifth best team. I'd probably say they're the sixth, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, well, because you've
Like
got
a
well,
healthy Milwaukee is probably the
the
fifth
fifth best.
best team,
I would agree with that.
something like that. But I mean, again, regardless, uh, they would have earned their way there. So like, I get the whole concept. I do. Um, in 2016 when the Patriots went through, like, put it this way, like when the Patriots went through Blake Bortles in the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then I know we had an incredibly crazy, hectic, unreal game against Atlanta, but if they went into like against Atlanta and just kicked their ass, like no one would be less excited that
Well,
they
we
won the
didn't.
Super Bowl.
Well, we didn't beat. We lost to the Eagles the year we beat the Jaguars in the title game.
Oh, I'm mixing it up. Yeah, that was
So
20.
it was
That was
that.
2015.
So Steelers that um the Falcons Super Bowl was we wiped the floor with the Steelers in the AFC title game.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah.
and
All
then
right. All right.
the
Yeah.
following year, yeah. But then you look at it, right? I mean, you talked about like football is obviously vastly different. I just think that, like from a fan perspective, and I guess I'll pose this question to you: would you rather watch a 7 game series where every game is non-competitive, or would you rather watch a 4 game sweep where every game is down to the wire?
As just like a neutral fan.
No, like if you're a Celtics fan, would you rather watch the Celtics beat the Cavaliers in 4 games where every single game is competitive, but they win every game, or
I
would
mean,
you
I guess
rather,
four because you're just
or
winning
would you,
in four.
or would you rather? But like, well, I mean, in a general statement too, right? Like, what's a better product? Like a 4 game sweep where all 4 games are competitive right down to the end, or a 7 game series where whether and it doesn't have to be how you can say it however you want, like whether it's like they just alternate wins or whatever, but like where every game is a blowout and one team just has no shot to
Yeah,
win.
we you can play the hypothetical into each. I guess I would say like four close games. Um, excuse me. But like Maz has made comment kind of with he's basically just setting himself up so he can discredit the championship. And I think
Yeah.
the bigger conversation is the Celtics are just significantly more talented than other teams.
Yes, I
And
think you'll see that talent disparity disappear a little bit if they get to the finals, depending on who they
yeah,
face.
because I think
Um,
they're closer to the Celtics, but like that's
yeah,
what like I
but
think
East,
that's what the big picture is, and
I
he's
mean,
setting
y-
himself up so he can discredit things, and it's really just like he's basically now punishing the Celtics for being significantly better than other teams,
yeah,
and that's where it just irritated me.
and to put it in perspective, like you want to talk about um, the talent disparity in the Eastern Conference. So the Celtics won the Eastern Conference by 14 games. They were 64-18. The Knicks, as the 2 seed, were 50-32, and they didn't even win their division title. Which is one thing. Like like aside, that's one thing that actually annoys me about the NBA playoffs is I have never been a fan of seeding by record because it discredits your ability to win a division title. So if you look at the standings, right, like the Milwaukee Bucks, the Celtics, the Bucks, and the Magic were your 3 division winners. They were the 1, 3, and 5 seeds. So 2 non-division winners had home court advantage during a playoff series. Like again,
Yeah, I don't know.
just tangent, like whatever. Like the NBA has done that forever. But but I think that like that speaks to the the talent disparity in the East is that the Celtics were 15 games better than the next division winning team, which was the Bucks. They were the 3 seed in the East, 15 games behind the Celtics. Celtics again
Yeah.
64-18. The Bucks were 49-33. So that's the big thing, right? Is the talent disparity in the East? I think is huge. If you look at like in the West, Oklahoma City, Denver, Minnesota were 56 wins or better. Okay, Minnesota was 156. The Nuggets and Thunder both won 57 apiece. Um, you know the and then the Mavericks also won 50 games. The talent disparity I think would be less so. I still think the Celtics are the best team. I don't know what the schedule looked like for them. I think if I'm not mistaken, they did beat Oklahoma City every time that they played them.
They beat
Um,
Minnesota because I was at that game. It was a phenomenal game.
they lost to Denver both times. Um, and they split with the T Wolves.
I
And
would
then
say I'm probably hoping.
and they
I
and
would say I
they
would maybe be
they beat
hoping to face OKC.
they beat Dallas both times. So of the 4 remaining Western Conference teams, Dallas is the only one that they didn't lose to.
Yeah.
So you know, I think like going back to it, it felt like, and I've said this before. I feel like sometimes on talk radio and TV shows that certain guys take certain stances for just the sake of having an argument. It's rare that you find, even when, and I'll just use this as an example because I can't come up with anything else. First Take, when it was Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp, they were almost never in agreement on any one topic. And so it almost felt like in between segments, they'd be like, okay, I'll take this side, you take that side, and come up with your talking points and have a debate. It feels a little scripted in that respect. I would imagine Maz isn't going home as a Celtics fan saying like, yeah, like it's going to be super hollow if they sweep the Cavs and then they get the Pacers and then they get the Mavs. Like he's not sitting there as a fan on his couch being like, yeah, this is a less quality championship because they played
Yeah.
an inferior
Well,
competition.
that's
It
where
just
it drives me nuts a little bit with like I get their gimmick. I get the Felger and Maz gimmick of what like, who they are and why their ratings are as high as they are and all that. I'm fine with like being pessimistic in their general sense. But those and that's why I quoted it was like they sometimes bring it to a point where it's so obvious that they're just like they have to find something to bitch about and they have
yeah.
to find the negative spin. So the only thing that they could really be a negative spin about the Celtics right now is essentially they are too good for it to be a fully um, fulfilling championship. Like that's essentially
Yeah.
the
I mean,
narrative that they pushed right there.
yeah,
And so
and
that's where I was just like,
yeah, and I think you can use different words for it. I mean, we've already touched on it, but I think you can use different words for it because, like, I kind of see where he's coming from. But at the same time, and he's said this before, because callers called in to call him out and being like, the championship doesn't count. And he was like, well, I never said the championship doesn't count. The championship does count. It's just, it will feel as a fan, and I'm pretty sure these were his own words. He's like, it'll feel more gratifying if they're not sleepwalking to a championship, which I think, and maybe to a degree, maybe there are fans out there that it will be that way because they could just sit back and be like, well, there's no point in even watching this game because it's always just gonna they're just gonna
it,
blow them off the court.
this is
But
just
like,
everybody's like the way people kind of feel about things. When things are like a long journey and you get to the finish line, it's a little bit more gratifying in like how you feel that you did an accomplishment.
yeah,
And
and it,
if you
go ahead.
if you ran a marathon, you're gonna feel more accomplished than if you run a 5K. Like
Oh, 100%.
yeah,
And I think Maz actually used a pretty good example. I think to again, Maz is a pretty smart guy. He wrote for the baseball writers forever. He obviously doesn't have any issues, articulating his feelings. But I think that really what he felt like, what he said something. This I was listening to him yesterday, the day before, forget when. But he said the example he used was back in '08 when the Celtics last won their title, it felt different because they beat the Lakers. And then the question was like, well, why did it feel different? It's like, well, because it's LA. And I think that speaks more to his point of it was like the diehard Celtics fans felt a little bit more gratified that yeah, they won, but they beat the Lakers because of the history, right? And I'm not saying that and that obviously doesn't take away anything, right? Like there's no like the Lakers are bad, yeah, I know that they made the play-in game and play-in tournament, they won a game and then whatever. But the Lakers are not a good team, but like there's no storyline, right? Like if the Bruins win, and I know it's tricky because it's like the Bruins can't win a title in a gratifying sense because there's no rival in the West like there is between like, you know, Celtics and Lakers, um, Red Sox Dodgers to a degree. But like if the Bruins were to go through an Eastern Conference tournament and along the way they beat the Habs on a way to a championship, to the diehard fans, that's going to feel a little bit more gratifying because it's like we won a title and we beat Montreal on the way. Like you know, screw the Habs, f them, we hate them. Like stuck it to their fans. Like we got it. We beat them on the way to a championship. We get to rub that in their face. Like that. I think that little bit I think is. And again, it's for clicks on the internet. It's for people tuning into the radio station. I think like if you were to sit down with him and ask him, I think that's really what he was hammering at and just kind of went over the top with it because he wanted to get people to call in and be like, why are you calling this champ? Why would you call a championship hollow before it even happens? But because I think there is truth to the idea that like if the Lakers were in it and the Celtics were to win banner number 18 by beating LA, it's a little bit extra special than if they beat any other team in the West.
Yeah, no, again, and
But yeah, but it's definitely not a hollow thing. I agree that like it doesn't mean less. It's not hollow. It's not less gratifying. It's the same gratification you would get. It's just you don't have that extra kicker of like beating the Lakers. You don't have that extra kicker of beating like the stud team in the West.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, the journey, I guess, makes things you feel a little bit different at the end. But like at the same time, like if the Celtics just bulldoze their way to a title, you get the satisfaction of just like,
oh yeah, but
we're the fucking kings.
Yeah, I mean the cool part is if they do that and they go through the Knicks and they go through like the T-Wolves or the Nuggets, like that's where they're going to stand on stage, and they can stand on there and they can flex a little bit and be like, we bulldozed the best teams the NBA threw at us along the way.
I get it.
That. No, and I'm not disagreeing. I was adding that to your point. So like even if the say they sweep Cleveland and they handle business against New York in a similar fashion to the way they handled against Miami. Even if they lose a game or two, but they're just totally dominant for most of that series, and they go dominate an NBA Finals, and they go beat a Minnesota or a Denver in 5 or 6 games, and they do it in dominating fashion. Is it like, yeah, did they dominate? Even if they let's just say let's pretend they don't lose a game the rest of the playoffs. They win the next 3 against Cleveland, they sweep New York, and they sweep the winner of the Minnesota Denver series, and they win a title. Like now they're going to be flexing on stage and they're going to be like, we dominated the best teams the NBA threw at us, and they're not going to take that away from us. That's the gratification piece that I think a lot of people would be able to hang their hat on. And anybody, hopefully Felgermaz don't go down this path, but hopefully anybody that says, oh, well, it was boring because they didn't face adversity along the way. It's like they beat the best teams in the NBA along the way in dominating fashion. Like what else? Like as a Boston fan, that we begged for that during the Patriots run for 20 years that we didn't want to have to sweat through a game. Yes, it was cool, sweating through Super Bowl 51 and 49 and it's like, but
in hindsight it's like, it's an amazing story of like the Atlanta Super Bowl, but like,
yeah. But it would have been nice if, like, go back to the Carolina Super Bowl. If Brady doesn't throw that interception when they're up 21-10, they blow out Carolina in that game. Like it would have just been nice to, like what Tom Brady did in Tampa against Kansas City in his first year as a Buccaneer. It would have been nice to see that game with him in a Patriots uniform. Like I don't look back at that as a Brady fan. I don't look back at that Buccaneers Chiefs Super Bowl.
This is JR. JR, I know you're busy. We're not talking about the Bruins.
No, we're talking about the Celtics.
We're talking about the Celtics.
So if you go back to now I lost my train of thought because JR's comment on X threw me for a loop. Um, Yeah, so if we had blown out Carolina back in 03, like I wouldn't look back at that and go like, oh yeah, that was less satisfying because we blew them out of the water. Like in hindsight, like immediately after beating the Colts in that AFC title game 45-7, I was like, this doesn't really feel like a playoff game because we just mopped the field with a vastly inferior team. But you look back at it, it's like that's not what you look at. It's you look at the totality of the whole season
Yeah.
about the fact that like they had that season, that regular season for the past that year, they had a gauntlet of like 6 games in the middle of the year. I think they went 4-2, or it was like 4-2 over 6 games, or 5-2 over 7 games, where they played like the best of the best teams along the way in both the AFC and the NFC. And you look at the totality of the whole thing, the Baltimore game, which I'm jealous that you were there. Like that's insane. I can't imagine what that atmosphere would have been like.
Oh man, dude, that
But
that
like
that double pass game was.
but like being on the edge of the seat, like I had buddies over at the house for those playoff runs, and like you look back at the totality of the season, you go, it culminated with beating like probably in like individual like defensive or offensive talented teams, like that era Seattle defense, like 2012 to 2015, could go down as like one of the best defenses of all time, right? I'm a little old school. Like 85 Bears to me is still the greatest defense of all time. Like that was nuts. But like we beat and Brady had like he dropped his nuts on the best defense in the NFL that year. I know he didn't have an
Yeah.
A+ game, but like he threw for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns against the best defense the NFL had to offer. So like bringing this all back to the Celtics, right? Like people in the moment might think like, oh yeah, that was kind of boring to watch because like they just won every game and we didn't really have to worry about whether they're going to win or lose because they were just so much better. But then you're going to look back at it like in hindsight and go, well, yeah, like they beat New York, 50-win team, dominated, and then they dominated arguably the second best team in the NBA. In let's just say it's Denver. Let's say Denver comes back and takes care of business against Minnesota. Well, you beat the NBA MVP in Nikola Jokic, who's won his third MVP in 4 years, probably the best player in the NBA right now. I mean, debatable, but one of the top players in the NBA.
I'd
And
probably
you're
say he is.
and
He's probably the best player right now.
yeah, so like when people look back at it, no one's going to say that it was hollow or less gratifying. Maybe in the moment they're like, oh well, yeah, like they won every game and it wasn't close. It was kind of boring to watch. But like we're talking pure entertainment value at that point. We're not talking
Yeah, we're talking
the
more. It's more about entertainment and like the again like the journey. Like if you run, you run a marathon, you're gonna feel more satisfied than I guess if you run a 5K. But like,
well, I would say more like if you want to use the marathon analogy, it would be: are you more satisfied because you battled with, you know, one, two, or three other people for 26 miles, or if you win the marathon by a half a mile? Like, sure, overall it's great, but like it, and I'm not saying it takes away. It would be like the battle is pushing it over the top. It's not
yeah,
bringing
the
it down.
competition.
So like the competition part is cool, and it's like, yeah, like I battled this guy the whole way. Like it was such a cool thing. Like it adds an element to it, but not having it doesn't take away, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, in the end, like if the Celtics get what do they need? 11 more wins, they're gonna be on the duck boats, and
Is it?
everyone will be just
Yeah,
as
11.
happy.
Yeah, like no one, no
And
one's,
then
no
if
one's gonna be yelling at Tatum, being like, "Why didn't you guys lose more games?"
yeah, exactly. And I think like it's the same thing that why they cakewalk to the 1 seed by it was wrapped up by like early April. It's just that like they're significantly more talented than the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're, I would say, significantly more talented than the New York Knicks. If they, my guess is they're gonna face Minnesota based off of how it's gone. Minnesota's up 2-0 against the Nuggets.
Yeah,
I would hope. I mean, Dallas is the hope, but I don't think that Dallas makes it. But of the three other teams in the West, I would probably hope for OKC just because they're a little bit less experienced and they're very young.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they match up the best against OKC. If they
it'll
get
be
Minnesota, Porzingis has to be on the floor every night. I think that if you
yeah.
don't have Porzingis for an NBA final, and I only bring up Minnesota because I think that even if you get Denver, like Jokic is gonna get his regardless of who's underneath. If you want to put like prime Tim Duncan on the floor, sure, I'll take prime Tim Duncan against Nikola Jokic. But even with KP,
I don't know if I will.
I mean, even if you have a healthy Porzingis, like I still think Jokic gets his. I just think they match up the best against OKC.
Yeah. So just experience wise, like OKC is a very young team.
Well, I
I
mean,
think the Celtics.
Minnesota doesn't have the experience either.
No, but I think Minnesota has. I think that they have a little bit more. I don't want to say experience, but they're a
Well,
little bit
but
older.
their players are
They have the Mike Conleys. Cat's been around a while. Gobert's been around a while.
yeah, they don't have the
Like,
playoff experience. They have the career experience that OKC doesn't have.
yeah, and so and I think Anthony Edwards is the ultimate dog type of guy, and so I think he'll if he makes the finals, he'll have a great series, and it will be a battle.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and so yeah,
it's scary to
I,
think that he's only 22 years old.
yeah, and so we'll see how things play out. Obviously, tonight they're starting in just a few minutes. But you know, I expect them to basically cakewalk through Cleveland. I think it should be done in 4, 5 max. I think they'll go through New York in maybe 5 games max. Um, and then we'll see how things play out in the West. But we'll hope for OKC. Well, we hope for Dallas, but of
Yeah,
the other three, we'll hope for OKC out of the Nuggets and in Minnesota. Just because they match up better. I think they'll have more experience, and I rather play a dominating guard than a dominating big man, uh, because the Celtics are so good defensively with their guards and forwards. Playing Minnesota with Cat and Gobert will be tough, even with Porzingis. Playing Nikola Jokic will be tough, even with Porzingis on the court. So I rather play. I just rather play, and then that's SGA's really freaking good.
he is.
I think he should have won the MVP. Um, that's just the dude averaged 30 a game on 53% shooting. It was
I
the
mean,
second. It was the second best field goal percentage among guards, and the guy that was number one took like a third of the shots of SGA. He brought
to be.
OKC to the 1 seed.
I mean,
Not that
to be.
Jokic didn't deserve it.
I mean, he was just shy of a triple double every day.
Who's
He
this?
was Jokic, 26, 12, and 9.
Oh,
What
it's not. Yeah, it's not that he doesn't
on
deserve it.
on 58% shooting. Now, granted,
Yeah, he's much.
he plays underneath, but he doesn't exclusively play on the block.
No, but any big man is gonna have a higher percentage. Like I said, SGA had among guards, he had the second highest shooting percentage, and the guy that qualified, I forget who it was, only had like a third of the field goal attempts as
Yeah.
SGA. So we'll wrap it up there. I wanted to get into some Celtics, but we went a little bit long. I mean, some Red Sox, but we went a little bit long on this whole topic. But go C's. We'll see how things play out. Hopefully, this time next week, I think they could be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Hopefully,
Yes.
maybe the Bruins. The Bruins. I would guess the Bruins are still going when we record next week.
Yeah, I don't have the the NHL schedule in front of me.
Well, Game 4 for the NHL is Sunday, so Game 5 I would guess is Tuesday, and Game 6 would be Thursday.
Yeah. Okay.
If I do that right. I think John Lyons is going to join us again next week. He'll be our first repeat guest. Hopefully, I think next Thursday. But yeah, until then, we're done here. We'll be back next week and go sees. Any final words?
No. So, and depending on when we're on next week, if the Celtics do not sweep, and we record on Tuesday the 14th, they will have a game on Wednesday. If the series goes to a sixth game, they would play Friday the 17th. So, depending on how the series goes, it could be over by the time we next time we record. I mean, I think the Seas are in great shape. You know, obviously we're pulling for the bees. Obviously they're the underdogs. Florida's really really good. Um, but no, I mean that's you know good time to be a Boston sports fan. Best sports city in the U.S. Um, I don't know if I'll say the world yet because I don't think I've experienced enough of the world to have that kind of an opinion. But yeah, I mean excited. We got rookie camp coming up for the Pats. Be nice to see those guys out there. Drake May, I guess, is going to get at least some kind of shot to battle for the starting QB spot, however much you want to read into that. But, we got rookie camp coming up. Good time all around to be a Boston sports fan.
Yeah. Hey, go Celtics, go Bruins,
Yeah.
go Red Sox. We didn't get to talk about them, but they're playing some decent baseball. Although the last couple days weren't great. So,
No.
but we'll talk about that more next week.
Yeah,
Until
exactly.
then, we're Raise the Banner. Thanks for listening.
Have a good night.